Start recording. All right, well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the return of the webinars. You all got a really nice break last week, but obviously starting from this week, Adam and I will be delivering probably about 4 webinars during the week, and you can correct me if I'm wrong there, Adam, but obviously we'll be moving through some of the material. We'll be moving through a lot more of the learning material and the learning activities, as well as the assessments. So you're probably going to have access to a lot more information about some of the units that you're currently working in. Tonight what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at effective communication, which hopefully you can all see on my screen. And in tonight's session we're going to look at the very first 2 learning activities in effective communication. The first one obviously being effective communication, and the second series of learning activities are preparing for an effective meeting. Just so that you are all aware, effective communication isn't technically the name of this unit of competency. The name of this unit of competency is actually manage meetings, but it's just clustered under the term or the unit name, which is obviously effective communication. The unit itself is structured very similar to the rest of the units that you guys have been working on. So a series of 5 learning activities overall, with 3 assessment tasks, as you can see down the bottom here. Okay, and as we've mentioned last week and the week before, all of that information, all those assessment activities, all of those learning activities are actually all accessible to you at the moment. So you can pretty much, you don't have to go work through your learning activities to be able to access your assessment tasks. Everything's accessible to you now, so you can just work at your own leisure and probably move a little bit quicker through the unit if you're interested. So has anybody started the unit yet, or just with those that are currently in the forum, has anybody started the unit as yet, or are we all just still working on it? Well, we're kind of working towards it. Oh, okay, Doris, you haven't started? Well, this would be great then for you. So hopefully the webinar will assist you in kind of getting started onto this next unit. Okay? All right. So currently nobody in the forum online tonight has started it, so it's a bit exciting. We can definitely, you know, kind of give you some information that will hopefully get you cracking on this particular unit, which is a nice unit to kind of to get through. All right. Well, what I might do is, I might just open that very first learning activity, which is effective communication. So just giving myself a couple of seconds to access it.
Yep. While you're doing that, Alyssa, I guess I'll just let the guys know that the new structure for the webinar series is going to be that there's 2 webinars per all of the resources. So what we were previously referring to as resource support and assessment support. So the resource support, we now have 2. It's a part 1 and a part 2. So if you ever see resource part 1, it's really the first half of the learning activities that we're going to be talking about. It gives us a chance to actually unpack the material and just talk about the material a little bit, explore the material a little bit, and then we have all of our assessments compacted into one, because what we were finding is we just had a little bit too much time for the actual assessment support webinars. We really just need to give you guys a bit of a guide as to what you need to hand in. The actual materials covered in these sessions in any case. So that's just a bit of an overview, and as Alyssa mentioned earlier, by the end of this session we'll actually have taken you through the first 2 learning activities, which is the first half of the learning activities in this unit, this subject called effective communication.
Yes. Now hopefully everybody can see my screen. I've just loaded up the very first series of learning activities, and as you'll notice there are 6 questions in this very first series of learning activities, and I guess the reason that we really start with this topic in terms of effective communication is the importance and the connection it has when you are managing meetings itself. So obviously communication is quite important and is a very key skill to have when you are involved in meetings. So we do kind of get you to start to think about the communication process before we get a little bit more technical in the next series of learning activities, which kind of are very specific about the types of and the requirements of certain meetings. So 6 questions to start you off with. And I think we may as well just kick straight into these questions.
Yeah,
Obviously, if you guys,
Alyssa, before you do, I just had I just thought maybe a good starting point is maybe just to clear up some of the definitions or just clear up the actual terminology of communication. So just talk a little bit about what communication actually is. And it actually comes from the word communication actually descends or derives from a Latin word which effectively means to share. So communication is really just the act or the art of sharing, and it's effectively the activity in exchanging ideas and feelings and thoughts and perceptions and all of these sorts of things. But the key thing to communication is it requires sender and requires a message, and it also requires a recipient. So there's sort of three components to it in that regard. You've got the sender and the receiver, which is sort of the obvious part, but then there's also the message that's trying to get through as well. So I guess that's just a very, very generic way of looking, or a very, very generalized way of sort of looking at it. And there's a few other sort of steps involved when talking about communication, which is between the sender and receiver. So it starts with the sender, so it starts as a thought first. Then that message has to be encoded, so to speak, and then finally decoded by the receiver. I think what we'll do is just jump straight into the questions from here. Grassley, that was actually just an interesting starting point.
yeah, absolutely. Having a bit of a concept as to, like what the word means, I think is a nice little introduction there. So, yeah. But obviously bearing that in mind, what we'll do is let's go through this very, very first question. It says list 3 methods of communication you might use with your team. Outline the advantages and disadvantages of each method. Okay. So I think in a couple of the other units previously, we've talked a lot about different ways you can communicate with your team. I think when we were looking specifically at project planning as well, we really stressed the importance of being able to communicate within your team, and I guess how you can communicate. What we're looking for here is we're looking for 3 methods or 3 ways you can use to be able to communicate with your team. And for each method that you choose, we want you to give us just a couple of advantages and a couple of disadvantages of each method, really. And they can be quite practical in terms of the way that you do communicate. They can be a bit informal. There are formal methods of communication and informal methods of communication. So what we would ideally like you to do is try and list at least 3. Okay. Adam, do you have anything else to add to that particular question, or?
Look, I mean, for what we're looking for is we really want to see that you can identify what some of the advantages and disadvantages of each of these methods are. I mean, each method, or the different methods, they generally have their pros and their cons, and we're mostly concerned that you're aware of the different sort of pros and cons that are associated with each of the methods of communication that you choose. So really, just to clear up, maybe we'll just get you, Alyssa, to type out a couple of methods on the screen, just so the guys know exactly what we're talking about. So I'll give you the first one. First method of communication is, okay, team meeting. There we go. So team meeting is the first one. So that's really good. Let's keep listing a few methods, and then maybe you and I we can have a bit of a chat about some of their advantages, disadvantages, etc. Email. That's another method of communicating. So let's put that one down as our method. What else could we do? Maybe a telephone call. That's probably an obvious one. Telephone call. Have you got any other methods that you'd like to put down here?
Team meeting, email, telephone call.
The team meeting is a group face-to-face, so maybe a one-on-one, a face-to-face one-on-one type of thing. Yep.
New group or one. Yeah, definitely.
Yep, cool. So let's have a chat about some of these SMS. Okay, we've got one from the audience here. Here's an option, SMS. Pop that in as a method of communication. We can have a chat about that one too. Beautiful. So let's have a look at the first one. I mean, team meeting. What do you what do you see as some of the advantages, disadvantages?
Yeah, I think,
Um,
look, personally for me, with regards to something like a team meeting, I think an advantage of having a team meeting is that you can deliver a message to a group of people
yeah.
so that the message it doesn't get passed on from one person to one person to one person. You're the deliverer of the message, so you're directly communicating to a group of people. But I think also that a disadvantage of a team meeting is that you're never 100% sure that what you're trying to communicate is received the way you intend it to as well,
Mm,
which is different
yeah.
because if you're in a one-on-one situation, you might be able to ascertain whether or not the communication method is effective because you could maybe ask them questions to determine whether or not they've understood. But a
Mm,
team meeting might, although you can deliver a message to a group of people at once, it also might mean that you may not have fully delivered that message effectively to all of those people, if that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, I'd like to consider a couple of things when you're delivering information to a group. There is always that risk, not a risk, but there's always that variable, if you like, of group dynamics. So what happens is that other people are affected by the presence of others in their space. So what I'm trying to say there is that if you're trying to communicate something to a group, some of well, maybe a disadvantage might be that some people in that group may or may not wish to contribute or will contribute only to a certain level because of others in the group. Now, I think I might be tripping over my words a little bit here, but for example, imagine you're in a group you're a salesman and we're having a sales team meeting and the sales manager wants to get everybody together and let them know a new process. They think, you know what, I'll get everybody together in the same space. That way I can save a lot of time, tell everybody in the one shot. What happens is if one or two of those sales guys misinterprets or doesn't understand what you've just said, the chance that they're going to clarify and ask you to repeat is highly unlikely because they are very, very affected by their peers and those that are around them, and they may or may not be feeling comfortable enough to ask a certain question of you. So there is a disadvantage to risk, effectively.
Oh, oh, oh.
You know, an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time whenever you're dealing with face-to-face communication is that you can provide a whole lot of additional emotion behind it too. So you can really convey your message, the emotion behind the message, your body language is a part of it. Now I say this is an advantage, but also if it's dealt with in the wrong way or if it's overexposed, you're dealing with somebody who may be quite sensitive to certain issues, it may be a disadvantage, the fact that there is that, you know, that face-to-face connection. So yeah, what about email? What would some of the advantages of email be?
It's quick, it's fast.
Mm,
You can
mm,
put a read receipt on it to guarantee that it's been received.
okay,
I think
good.
that it's a really easy way to communicate to a large group of people. However, having said that, I think it's also quite impersonal.
Yeah,
I think people read into things that perhaps their interpretation of the words can be a little bit different to the intent. And sometimes email may not be as accessible for everybody in some organisations as well.
I think that last point is just that people can misinterpret the meaning of an email very, very easily, so to speak, because there isn't that sort of, you know, there isn't uh, the extra body language involved, there isn't the extra emotion that's involved. So you might interpret something as simple as, can you do this activity? So I don't know, you could just completely misinterpret that as an order rather than a question. So you always have to double check your emails before you send them just to make sure that they're not going to be reread, I guess, in the wrong fashion. Always be careful to put the pleases and the thank yous in the email because otherwise what happens is that those requests can come across as a little bit harsh or a little bit orderly, if you like. So that's certainly a disadvantage there. What about telephone calls? What would you say is an advantage of a telephone call or a conference call?
Um, I think I can think of a couple of disadvantages for a telephone call. I guess
Yeah, go for it.
a telephone call is quite personalised, so I think that's probably an advantage of an actual telephone call. itself. Obviously, if it's a conference call, it's maybe a little bit different because there might be a series of people being communicated to. I think that the disadvantage of a telephone call could probably be, look, I think maybe dropout rate. I think that,
Yep, yep.
uh,
Look, there's no record of the
yeah,
communication like you would have in an email. You've got a record SMS, you've got a record team meetings, you take minutes, you've got a record. Where's the record of the communication in a telephone call?
yeah, that's exactly
So,
right. There's no
yeah.
documentation to prove that it's been had.
What about an SMS? What's the advantages and disadvantages of this method of communication?
Um,
So I might just jump in on this one. I
yeah, of
think
course.
one of the benefits, I guess, using SMS is that instant ability to communicate to somebody in any situation. You could be traveling, you could be hiking through the mountains of Tasmania on your week off holiday, and yet somebody could still send you an SMS and send a message to you at that moment, that exact second in time. So it's instant. That's definitely a positive, and that's got to be an advantage. Some of the disadvantages, though, I think are pretty clear. I mean, again, similar to email, and it's probably even more dangerous with SMS. The message can be misinterpreted. It's often hard to write a full message that explains everything that you want to explain in an SMS as well. I find that can be quite a tough one as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes SMSs are a little bit, I mean, informal. I think I'm not I'm not 100% sold on if it's the most effective of ways to communicate, but it's definitely a method of communication. So
Look, if you're a manager and you've got your sales reps out on the road and you know that they're picking up phone calls and they're dealing with clients all day, you may want to send them a quick message that they get, which could be an SMS, but you don't want to bother them by picking up the phone and potentially interrupting a call with a client. So there are ways that you can get a really quick, short, sharp, hey Adam, the boxes arrived for you or your client or whatever it might be, perfect. So there are some really good times where that kicks in, but for personalised messages or ones that may require a little bit of, encoding and decoding, I guess, or I'm trying to determine what the message is about, it's a very, very dangerous platform.
yeah. Um,
Let's roll on to the next question.
yeah, I mean, you guys only need to pop in 3 methods, so obviously we've given you a few there, so you can take your pick. Let's move on to that. Yes, question 2. Describe why building levels of trust will help to improve communication and impact performance within your team.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, it's a really interesting topic of conversation, trust, and it's really, really hard. And you look, there's literature, lots of literature out there on it, but they all come from a different angle, and everybody's got something different to say in terms of trust. Trust, and it's actually written in the actual learning materials as well. So trust, it's fragile. It takes a long time to develop trust. Well, not a long time, and it can be done quickly if you sort of know the ways to do it. But it actually can take a second to destroy. So you can have years of building up trust between somebody. It can be gone and lost very, very easily and quickly. But we're talking about trust and how it improves communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the question here is describe why building levels of trust will help to improve communication and performance in your team.
Yeah, and if you trust somebody, you've got time to listen to them. You understand them, they understand you. It's really a part of that two-way type of concept of communication. And at the same time, if there is trust there, it will definitely have a positive impact on the performance of your team. Communication is designed to, be spoken and be heard, and then be acted upon. And, if you're not trusting the words that come from your manager, or there is no trust there, then you're probably not going to be inclined to be able to listen to what their instructions are or what they request from you, and you probably won't be able to perform the tasks that maybe they've asked you to do. So I think, trust and I think trust is essential, and I think you could almost get away with, kind of having a very, personalised response to this type of thing. For people, I think trust
Yeah.
means different types of things, and everybody's concept of trust will be quite different and quite unique, I think.
Let's talk about it a bit though. There's 5 components of trust in the learning material that are actually really interesting. So I might just read through these 5 things because the learning materials actually give you, these are the 5 components that they give you to I guess, to trust. One is competence. So when we're talking about competence, we're talking about technical and interpersonal knowledge and skill. So, if you're looking at somebody that might have been a veteran of the industry, has been around 100 years, knows every nook and cranny of the industry, there's an element of trust in that. I know that this person has seen it before, has been there before, has walked this road before. So that's one of the 5. Second one is consistency. So reliability, predictability, and good judgment in handling situations. If somebody operates in a way that you deem as being consistent and reliable, so yes, I know that they're going to do this in this situation, that's a part of trust. If somebody acts completely unpredictably and there's no reliability and effectively they have no consistency, it's very, very hard to maintain that level of trust. Another element of trust or a component of trust is what we call integrity. So that's having honesty and being truthful. This is probably the most important element of trust. If you feel that the person is honest and truthful to their word, then trust almost comes quite naturally. And if for 1 second you feel that somebody is not telling you the truth, they're lying, they're acting in some sort of way that's that doesn't show any integrity whatsoever, very, very hard to build any trust around that. Next component that they refer to in the material, loyalty. So, and this actually refers to the willingness to protect people and save face for them. So it's really interesting. Those that are actually really, really loyal to their cause, that's actually one of the components of trust. The last one that's listed here is openness, so willingness to share ideas and information freely, which I find is a really interesting one as well. Something that gets talked about a lot in leadership conversations in terms of self-disclosure and willingness to show your own, your own true self, so to speak. And I guess those that are willing to sort of show their own true self and really open themselves up and what we call self-disclose, so maybe tell a bit of a story about themselves, give you a bit of an understanding on who that person really is. Those that actually can do that well are generally those that can build trust really, really strongly within their team. Actually, when I was doing my leadership studies recently, there was an article I came across which was talking about a massive grass fire, I think 60 or 80 years ago, where a lot of firefighters perished during the fire. And they talked about trust was really low between the group. What happened was that they put a brand new, leader, I guess a brand new head of the firefighting unit, so to speak, was brand new and had not gone out of his way to introduce himself to the group, to what we're just talking about now, being open, by willing to share and disclose themselves, let other people know who they are, tell them where they've come from, talk about their abilities and technical abilities, but also just generally chat to his firefighters. What happened was the grass fire changed direction while all of the firefighters were down on the field. The fire changed directions, and the leader, brand new guy, said, "All right, everybody, follow me. We're going this way." Now, in a state of emergency when you can't really think very clearly and you need to trust or you need to act on sort of certain instincts, you need a level of trust. Somebody's yelling at you, "We're going this way," and your gut instinct is, "Hang on, that's not the way to go. There's a fire coming from that direction." What happened was the group split. Some people went, some people didn't, and those that didn't ended up losing their life. And the reason for that is there was just no trust that was built during that time. So trust is such an important part of anything, but in teams, putting teams together, galvanizing teams. So yeah, I guess that's just a little bit on trust.
Absolutely, and I think it's key to, it almost feels like it's key to survival.
Yeah, absolute. I mean, look, we all sort of know what the word trust means. So happy for you guys to answer that from the perspective that you understand as well. But yeah, so I guess put simply, you're more likely to work to follow the lead of somebody if you trust that person. And that's really as simple as it is. You're more likely to follow somebody that you trust rather than somebody that you don't. Let's roll on to the next question, Alyssa.
All right, so let's have a look at question 3. Why do you believe two-way communication is essential, and how does empathy play an important role in effective communication? Wow, look at those feeling words. In question 2 we had trust, and in question 3 we have empathy. Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess
let's clear up the word empathy though. Let's just before we get going. I mean, how would you explain to the guys what does the word empathy mean?
All right. Look, I think empathy is kind of, when we talk about the traditional wording of empathy, taking yourself out of your own shoes and putting yourself in the shoes of another person. So really being able to see somebody else's perspective on something. So I guess in context to empathy and communication, how you communicate is based on how you empathise with the person that you're communicating with. If you can't understand or you're not sure where they come from, it's very difficult to be quite effective in your communication with them. So if you understand where they come from, if you put yourself in their shoes, effectively what you're doing is you're communicating the way they need to be communicated effectively too.
And Alyssa, that's the word for me, is understanding. That's just the word is understand or understanding. I feel that just covers it in a really nice, simple way. Sorry to jump in, but that's probably the easiest way for guys to understand it, I would have thought.
Yep, absolutely. Empathy is definitely understanding, somebody else's perspective on something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So I guess two parts of this question: why do you believe that two-way communication is essential? And then, how does empathy play an important role in effective communication? So really what we're saying is, how does understanding somebody else and trying to understand somebody else's point of view, why is that important when you're communicating effectively? And that's sort of what we're really saying there. Are you comfortable with what we've gone through there for the guys? Anybody in the live feed now, if you have any questions as we go, feel free to jump in as always.
Okay.
But, I think right at the start I was talking about that 3 stages to communication. It starts from the sender, then it goes into the middle of nowhere. Basically, you shoot this message across, and then the receiver has to sort of deal with it and try and make sense of it. So I guess on a really plain level, if you're not understanding where the other person is, if you're not showing any empathy or understanding the other person, then the message that you're sending is more likely to fail because you're not considering some of their needs or some of their considerations when you're sending that message. You're not considering the person who's receiving that message when you're sending it.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's really what that question is all about.
Yeah.
3 examples of barriers to effective communication.
Yeah, so obviously that question 4 is, describe at least 3 examples of barriers to effective communication that you may face within your current work environment. I guess...
Now I was going to say I could probably talk about this for ages. I've got a heap of stuff that I'd really like to talk about in terms of roadblocks to communication and things like that. I just think it might get a little off course today from where we're at. So I'm going to stick to the question if you like. I think we should just stick to the question. The learning materials actually have some really good stuff in it for you guys on this question. In fact, there's a whole heap of stuff that they list in there. Some of the I'll throw a few at you, Alyssa, and then you can check a couple at the guys as well. So an example of a barrier to communication might be, say, the use of jargon or the use of overcomplicated or unfamiliar terms. So here's a definite barrier to communication: using language that is inappropriate, irrelevant, overcomplicated, or unfamiliar.
Yep.
Probably most Australians will recognise this feeling when they travel overseas and they realise that we've been speaking some sort of cut-up language that others in in the Western world have absolutely no idea what we're talking about. That's just a perfect example of the fact that Australians use a lot of jargon, a lot of slang, and you've just got to be careful when you're shooting a message across. The barriers. This can go on and on and on and on. Have you got a couple that you want to throw in there for the guys? I mean, really, I guess the materials are going to list a lot of stuff in here, and so I probably prefer the guys sort of check out the materials. But really, what we're looking for is a barrier. So anything that's going to get in the way of that message going from the sender to the receiver.
Yep. And I think
tangible and intangible. So, go for it. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Adam. I think the learning material has quite some good barriers to that effective communication, and I think once the guys go through the material, I think that they'll find those quite appropriate and quite easy to understand why some of these things would be barriers, and without kind of giving the answer or giving the answers, the resource material definitely help you. And as you mentioned, anything that kind of stands in the way or an obstacle to being able to effectively communicate your message to somebody. So yeah, I think you've given a great example. If we go into too much more depth, we might be giving away too much of the answer.
We're giving away the answers if we actually just give them to the guys. But just think of anything that might get in the way of a message getting from point A to point B. And that could be anything. So again, it's hard to sort of throw too much at this one without giving you just straight up giving you the answer. But the materials actually talk about this one pretty well.
That I agree.
Next question. Open door policy.
Oh, nice.
Now, does this mean that the person's door has to remain open? Is it about the door? Is it all about the door?
I think it's all about the accessibility.
Ah, okay. I thought it just meant the door had to be open.
I think it's more about the. Well, I think you can have it. You can use it figuratively and literally. So it could be a figure of speech, or it could be literal. I mean, I think that open door policies just are about trust, are about empathy. I think they're about you feeling like you can access the people that you need to access, or your team can access you whenever they need to. And I guess the concept open door means that the door is always open, so therefore if the door's always open, you're always welcome.
Yeah, well, and it's funny though we talk about the figurative versus literal meaning of the open door policy, because generally speaking, those that do leave their office doors open are more approachable anyway. So there is some sort of connection between the physicality of actually leaving a door open and being approachable. And really, you're spot on. It's really just about others knowing that you're approachable. So it's not about what you think that you are. It's about how others perceive you. So an open door policy is really about others being aware of your approachability, that you're open, that they can come and voice their questions, concerns, complaints. They can talk about anything that they need to talk about with you, and they know that you're open for business at any time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great little concept. And I think when you talk about things like leadership, I think it is a kind of key figure of speech, and the importance of being able to be approachable and being accessible. And I think if you're hiding behind a door all day, I think it does really relay a specific type of message to your team members, and does really limit that level of communication if we're talking about communication. So yeah.
Absolutely. And we were talking a bit before about trust. If you're open and you're consistent, and somebody can just go over to you and they know that you're going to be there and work with them, it helps build trust, which, as we've discovered, increases that ability to communicate cleanly and clearly. There's so many great benefits from it. So, yep. Beautiful.
Absolutely. All right, let's have a look down here. Okay, we've got that last question. Give an example of a time when you may have been ineffective in communicating to a direct report. Okay. How could you have...
let's just clear up some definitions here. Can you just clear up direct report? Because this was actually one that my students stumbled on too. So let's clear up some of the terminology, direct report.
Yeah, absolutely. I would define direct report as somebody that that might be like a supervisor who you would report directly to regularly. So I think that so whoever, I guess, whoever's driving you or whoever's responsible for you or whoever looks after you or whoever you report to, I guess that's what my interpretation of direct report. So it's not me telling somebody that will tell somebody else, but it's me directly, regularly speaking to somebody within my work, probably somebody that kind of is my direct supervisor or direct manager.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what we're looking for. And I guess the key here is that we're looking for somebody where you need to cleanly and clearly communicate something to. So not the vets or not the down at the dog park, you know, where we want somebody that you actually have to report to in your professional life. Now, what about the guys that may not be employed at the moment, Alyssa? What can they do for this one?
Oh, perhaps even though they might not, I mean, can we get them to maybe possibly use previous employment experience where they have had to, or they've been in a situation where they communicated or they had a direct report? That could be one option.
The key here is for us that you're picking an example of where you really had to get a proper message across. So look, if you've never been employed before, then just pick an example where you've been ineffective in communicating. Try and pick an example where you really needed to get the message across and it had sort of consequences as a result. So, you know, don't pick a time where you're just, you know, trying to work out which flavour of ice cream to select or something. So if you haven't been employed, talk about a situation where you needed to communicate something really important to somebody else and it wasn't effective. Something happened, it wasn't great. Effective. So, yeah.
Yeah, so and it's just really one example, and so describe that example to us, and how could you have delivered the message in a more effective way and gained a different outcome? So it's really asking you to kind of review that example, and you know that essentially when you initially communicated the message that it was ineffective, so looking back, what would you have done differently to be able to deliver that message better, and how would that have gained a different outcome? Okay.
Now, tips to the students, there's a fantastic thing on the learning material called 10 Communication Principles That Work. Have a look at the learning materials, 10 Communication Principles That Work. They are 10 ideas or tips, if you like, to improve your communication skill. You can refer to some of these if you're trying to answer this question in terms of how you may have been able to deliver your message a little bit better.
Sounds good.
Let's roll on to the next set, shall we?
All right, let's do it. Okay.
Any questions from the live feed while we're rolling up to the next round of questions, or are we okay to go?
I'm just going to organise the next set of learning activities, so if anybody's got any questions. Yeah. These questions probably are a bit of a welcome relief to the other questions that were actually, especially on that project planning, a bit more technical, I think.
Yep.
These are quite nice, these questions.
Yeah. Look, I love all the communication style questions. It's a really interesting field for me because I feel that communication is, and it links so closely to, you know, key leadership skills. Without the understanding of being able to communicate cleanly and clearly, you're just all at sea if you're trying to be a good leader. You're trying to motivate others and you're trying to engage others and do all these wonderful things without good communication skills, clean communication skills and understanding, you know, a lot about that, you're going to be really in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Can everybody see my screen now? I've just got the next series of questions up.
Yep, it's all right there for us to see.
Beautiful. Okay, great. All right, shall we head on? We've got 5 questions in this particular set of learning activities. So these get a little bit more technical. So we've talked about the whole concept of the importance of communication in those first learning activities. And here's where we really get to really start about the, and to really touch and go into a little bit more detail on some of the intricacies of the actual unit itself, which is managing meetings. So that very first question just says, give 2 examples of a meeting purpose. Okay? So quite simply, what are 2 reasons that you might need to conduct a meeting? what would be the reason for conducting, 2 examples for the reason for conducting a meeting. Okay.
Does anybody who's in the live feed want to throw a couple of what are some reasons that you might actually run a meeting? Why would we even have a meeting at work? Why would I get my team together to talk about, well, yeah, you tell me.
Yeah.
So out of the guys in the live feed, feel free to throw a couple of options at us.
Yeah, and think about maybe some of the meetings that you've attended to or attended in the past and why you had to attend them. What was the purpose of attending them? What was the point of attending them?
Now, there's also some really good information and learning materials on these ones too, guys. So have a look in there. I would just, I guess, just like to say that. Sorry, there's a really bad slapback of my voice here. Can you please move the microphones there, Lisa?
Sorry, what was that? I got a double up.
Yeah, you need to mute everybody's mic, please. Okay. So look,
yes.
You know, you could say things like daily or weekly meetings. Now, I prefer to what the purpose is. A purpose is not a daily meeting. No. That's a schedule. So, you know, that's not really good enough for me. I want to see what, you know, and one of the guys in the live feed now has mentioned to inform.
Yep.
And that's pretty much one of the main reasons why you might have a meeting. You might be informing a group of people about whatever. There might be some changes, there might be some procedural changes, there might be some things happening that you need to inform.
Yeah.
That's perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect. Yeah. In fact, there's a couple of other ones also in the learning material. I guess it's pretty, yeah, so I'd probably go and have a look at those. Yeah. But generally speaking, you meet up to inform people of things, to introduce a new concept to people, to decide on things. It's probably one of the most common reasons for a meeting is to make a decision.
Yep.
So you may want to decide on something. So to do that, we'll say, cool, everybody, we're going to get everybody together. We're going to put all the issues out on the table. We've got a couple of options here. And by the end of it, we're going to all, as a group, decide on which one we want to go for.
Yep.
Cool. Yep. So you can also do it to problem solve, to strategize, there's lots of different purposes. We want to know what your purpose is. So if you just say the purpose of the meeting is for our weekly sales meeting, it's not good enough. Yeah. What is the purpose of having a weekly sales meeting? Maybe to energize and motivate. They're good reasons.
Yep. Yep. Review performance, yeah. Or
spot on. Perfect.
Just all
yep. They're all good reasons.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, Lisa.
No, you're right. And we only need 2 examples of the meeting purpose. So just give us just 2, nice and easy. All right. Let's move on to that next question. It says, imagine you were preparing for a meeting for your team to discuss the progress of your current project. Identify 4 items on the agenda. Okay. All we need you to do is really specify 4 items that you might include on an agenda.
Now there's some reference material here that's going to go down really well for the guys as well. So as you're talking, I'm going to see if I can find exactly where that is for the guys, just to point them in the right direction.
Yep.
But there's a whole heap of discussion points on, you know, what's in an agenda, basically. What would you put in an agenda, as it were. And we're only looking for generic responses here, guys, so you don't have to tell us the specifics, so to speak. Or,
you don't need to be specific about, I guess, the fact that you're preparing for a meeting to discuss a project. We just really want some 4 generic things that do need to go on an agenda. And as Adam's mentioned, the reference material will assist you in giving you some pretty good information as to what an agenda might need to include. And I guess for those people that have maybe created an agenda or received an agenda before, you might be familiar with what some of the requirements are on that particular documentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really, when we're talking about an agenda, what do we really mean? It's really just the, the run sheet, I guess, if you like. So what the plan of attack for what's going to be dealt with or said or explored during that actual meeting itself.
Yep.
So that's all we're looking for, is just generically speaking, generalised areas that you're going to cover.
Yep, absolutely.
What are the things you're going to cover in a meeting? So have a look in the materials for that one. Next question, question 3, list 3 things that you should consider to ensure the style and structure of your meetings are appropriate.
Okay, right. So, I guess what this question's really asking you to do is this question's really asking you to kind of, in my opinion, and Adam, you can elaborate on this, but how do you make sure, the structure of your meetings is relevant? How do you make sure that you stay on target? How do you make sure that the style of your meeting is relevant to the participants, and perhaps even the style of meeting is relevant for the actual meeting itself? So I guess the keywords there are things like style and structure. So how do you make sure that, I guess for me, this question is really asking you, how do you make sure that you stay on track? How do you make sure that the meeting is the right type or style of meeting for the actual area that you're discussing? Perhaps, for example, I guess an example that I could probably think of would be that in terms of your structure, you might want to list a series of objectives or something that you need to cover to make sure that that you're achieving what you need to achieve during the meeting. So you do stay on course, that it is very structured, because sometimes meetings can go a little bit haywire and they can run off track a little bit. So that's probably what I would be looking for in terms of that response.
Yeah, and look, there's a really good page, guys. I think it's called Develop Agenda in Line with Stated Meeting Purpose or something like that. That's the actual name of the page, the learning material page. And it really just talks about, what a meeting is, but why choosing a meeting, where to put it, who to invite, all of those sorts of things. And they're the sorts of things that we want you to consider as well. So the style. Yeah, that's really what type of, are we outside, are we inside, is it formal, is it informal, is it, are we doing it online as a group, how many people are there, those sorts of things. Structure, there's a little bit of information on structure, and it's actually really interesting. The structure, the learning material talks about structure as in reference to group dynamics. So it actually talks about the structure of a meeting being in reference to who you actually invite. So depending on the people that you have in the meeting, everybody has a different sort of rank or status or something like that. And different people will operate differently depending on those that are involved in the meeting as far as their rank and file goes. So it's an interesting sort of point, talks about the different types of power and things like that. But really for this, just think again, generally speaking, as Alyssa sort of pointed out at the start, when trying to pick the place and the people, what are some things you might want to consider to make sure that you're getting the right place and the right people?
Yep.
I think that's probably the best way to just explain this question.
And we're only asking you to list, it's not about describing, so just list those 3 things that you need to consider.
Yep, spot on.
All right, I'm just loading up the next 3 or the next 2 questions, so just 2 seconds. Oh, yay, okay.
Cool.
All right. Okay.
So yeah, there's a video here, YouTube clip.
Yep.
I think it's about, how long does it go for there, Alyssa? Maybe 1-2 minutes maximum?
Yep. And that question there is, what were your 2 main learnings after watching the above YouTube clip on finding a balance between having a work meeting and work? So again, just obviously have a bit of a look at the YouTube, and then you tell us what the 2 main things that you took from that learning, from that YouTube clip, on the importance of just having a meeting and work. So I guess, yeah, it's just a matter of you having a look at that and bringing your understanding into your answer.
I guess holistically, you know, I mean, in my experience here, that people often hate feeling like they have to go to more meetings than are required.
Yep.
People don't mind going to meetings, and people understand the importance and need for having meetings. But one way to really annoy people is to get them to go to more meetings than they feel they need to.
Yep.
So if I'm sitting around in a meeting where I really needed to be there for maybe 5 seconds of it, there was only one little small component of that meeting that was relevant to me, and I have to sit through an hour of waffle to get to that one bit of gold that I really needed at the end, it's really annoying because that 1 hour I could have actually gotten some work done, and we're meeting about why the fact we're not hitting our targets. Well, I can tell you why I'm not hitting my targets, because I'm sitting here listening for an hour as to you explaining something about something that's completely irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
So one thing to keep in mind, I guess, is really what this question or the video talks about, is getting the right balance between, you know, great communication lines, involving people. We talk about the fact that we need to involve people, we need to meet, we need to talk, we need to do all these things, but you've got to be making sure that you're getting the balance right, because if you're just over-meeting and effectively wasting people's time, yeah, it's frustrating. It's really annoying because you want to get on with the job. You want to get on with doing the work.
Yep.
And sometimes some people can be included in the meeting without actually physically having to be there. You include them in the email that goes on after the meeting. You can go up and face-to-face say, hey, look, you're welcome to come. It's completely up to you. I'm happy for you to decide. This is what the meeting's about. There's really only one part that's really relevant to you. I can actually even, you know, open the door when we get to that part of the meeting and call you in if you want me to do it that way. Try and find the right balance, because, you know, it does really frustrate people when they're stuck in meetings all day and not feeling like you're actually getting any work done. So
yep.
I guess that's really what that one is talking about.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I am very familiar with the whole let's have a meeting. Let's have a meeting about that. Let's have a meeting about that.
Yep.
You know, it does definitely. You've got to. They have to be effective, because they can be very much a hindrance or a disturbance. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, Alyssa and I, just for those that are listening, we quite often have a telephone meeting every morning, or we chat every morning about what's happening, what's going on in the world of our wonderful students and what we're doing and all these sorts of things. But one thing that we're also very conscious of, and we're very, very open with each other anyway, it's quite an informal kind of meeting, I guess you could say, rather than a very formalised meeting. But what we are very aware of is that we both have other things that we need to do, and so if one of us says, look, I really got to jump over to here for an hour, can I call you in an hour, is there a better time? I really just want to do this right now.
Yep.
That way, and we're very open with each other, but that way neither of us are feeling like, God, can we just kind of, this is sort of annoying, or it's not really helpful right now because I've got some extra work that needs to happen. So it's finding the right balance.
That's it. Exactly
between
right.
sort of meeting and work.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
the last one is just talking about technology.
Yes.
It's
So,
an easy one, so we're going to only just sit in some tech here.
yeah. And look, describe the technology you have used to hold a meeting and the benefits you observed. I mean, I would even consider that, you know, something like GoToTraining or GoToMeeting is, well, this type of function or this type of technology, if you're not sure of any technology, could be perhaps used to assist in answering this question. What are your thoughts on that, Adam?
Well, exactly what we're doing right now, guys, is we're having a meeting where it's a formal meeting. We advertised it, we invited you guys to the meeting, and we told you exactly what we're going to be talking about prior to the meeting, so we gave you a heads up. The meeting is, as Doris mentioned earlier, is to inform and to, to describe and to inform information. It is a meeting of information providing. This is what this meeting is all about. And so the technology that we're using in order to do that is this webinar technology that we're sitting on at the moment. So, you know, if you want to talk about some of the benefits of that, and what are some of the benefits of using this particular technology to do what we're doing right now?
Yeah.
What would you say, Alyssa? What's the number one benefit that this technology has?
Oh,
That we're
definitely,
using right now?
definitely accessibility. Yeah, I mean, Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a great, friendly way. You can access, like, I'm sitting in a different state to you. I think it's a really cost-effective way of holding a meeting as well. It has
Mm-hmm.
strict limitations on time. And you can obviously, when we're looking at things like an online system as well, it's a great, you can have that interactive process too. I find it quite a good tool, but mainly because it is so accessible, and it can be quite expansive to a lot of people. So
Now, if we didn't have this technology, Lisa, how else would we do it?
yep,
We'd have to. I'm not sure how we do it. We could do a teleconference, but one of the benefits that this particular software has is that you can actually see the
yep.
screen, your screen. We're all looking at your computer screen. You're in Sydney, New South Wales somewhere, and I'm stuck out here in freezing cold Melbourne. Thank you very, very much. Um, I don't think there's a webinar that's gone past where I haven't made some sort of reference to New South Wales versus Victoria. In any case, um, so yeah, the benefits here is that you can see, you can hear, you can get everybody in the one environment at the same time. So just give us one example of a piece of technology. That could also be, a PowerPoint presentation. And what are the benefits by having a PowerPoint presentation? You could talk about, yeah, what else what other bits of technology could you use in a meeting?
Yeah, you could use, like, even something like Skype would also be another option,
Yep.
in
Yep.
terms of technology. But
Yep.
definitely, if you're kind of not sure, I mean, PowerPoint is a really good piece of technology that can be used. Where was I? I was on the plane yesterday and I saw this new piece of technology that is used for meetings, and I think it's quite an interactive meeting agenda tool or something, and I was like looking at it going, oh my
Right.
goodness. But that's obviously for companies that have a lot of money. But there's a lot of different technologies, and just, I guess, consider. I've known people that have used their iPhones as a data projector as well.
Yeah, right.
So that would be a piece of technology that they would use to be able to, communicate their message using their iPhone or their iPad, which I think is um, quite, quite interesting in terms of just like, carrying a data projector and minimizing the weight, and also, so you're kind of very minimalist in what it is that you're doing, and it's easy to hold a meeting and to be able to visually display what you need to. So yeah, that's another option. But yeah, like,
Any benefit, you just list any technology and talk about a benefit you can get from that technology in the case of a meeting, and then you've answered this question beautifully.
yeah, absolutely.
So whatever you want, if you want to just talk about a computer even, and what can that computer do? Well, I can pull up data, I can pull up information, I can pull up customer records, whatever the case might be, that's
Yeah.
fine. And that's basically, I think that's it for this round or this webinar. So that effectively concludes the resource webinar for this subject part 1. This time next week, now let me just check the calendar for those that are in attendance. This is a business subject, I believe. Yeah, this is a business subject, a primary business subject. Let me just have a look for students right now. The next version of this one will actually be next Monday, and that's the 2nd of March. That's part 2, so we'll be talking about powerful presentations in communication and outcome-focused meetings. So those 3 will be dealt with next Monday between 6 and 7 for business students. We do have a session between 9:30 and 11, which is 2 resources combined for make a presentation. It's a double session on Wednesday morning. And you're also welcome to join us between 4 and 5 p.m. on Thursday for staff. Oh, sorry, 8:30 till night's been changed. 8:30 a.m. till 9:30 a.m. for staff recruitment induction.
Yep.
Just keep an eye out on the webinar block, because all of the links and all of the times will be there. So just have a look on your home pages of each of the subjects. You'll see the webinar blocks. You'll see the videos for that subject, and you'll also see a list of upcoming webinars for all subjects.
Yep.
Just keep an eye out for those, and yeah, beautiful.
Yep. No, that sounds good. All right. Any questions?
Any questions?
Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah.
I think these are really nice learning activities. I think
Yeah.
it's a bit of a welcome change from some of the other stuff that you've been doing, especially the project planning.
Yep. Indeed.
Induction, manage. Doris.
Yeah, no, I like this subject. I like this subject.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Doris, have you completed? Yes, you have. You've done. That was the very last assessment
Okay.
that you did in the old portal, which was that manage staff recruitment, selection, and induction.
Does anybody have any questions about the learning materials before we turn off the recording? Okay. Maybe we'll just flip the recording off and then we can just continue.
Okay.